In the summer of 1793, the most powerful men in the United States packed their bags and ran. Not from a foreign army, not from a rebellion. They ran from something invisible, something they couldn't fight, negotiate with, or outrank. And the city they abandoned, it wasn't just any city. It was the capital of the United States of America. What happened in Philadelphia during those brutal months wasn't just a medical disaster. It was the moment the young republic nearly collapsed before it ever truly began. And most Americans have never been told the full story. Let's go back. Philadelphia in 1793 was the beating heart of the new nation. It was the largest city in America, home to roughly 50,000 people, a place buzzing with commerce, politics, and ambition. The Constitution had been written there just 6 years earlier. The federal government operated there. George Washington lived and worked there. This was the center of everything. Then summer arrived. It started quietly, the way catastrophes usually do. In early August, a handful of people in the waterfront district near Water Street began falling ill. Fever, chills, violent vomiting, their skin and eyes turned a horrifying yellow. Then they began to bleed from places the human body should never bleed from. And then within days, many of them were dead. Dr. Benjamin Rush, one of Philadelphia's most respected physicians and a signer of the Declaration of Independence, was among the first to recognize what he was dealing with. Yellow fever, a disease that had ravaged Caribbean ports for generations, and it was spreading fast. By the end of August, people were dying at a rate that stunned even seasoned doctors. The streets, once packed with the noise of a thriving capital, began to go quiet. Shops closed. Church bells rang so constantly to announce the dead that city officials eventually ordered them silenced, because the sound alone was driving people into panic. And then the exodus began. The wealthy fled first, loading carriages and heading to the countryside. Then the middle class followed. Then anyone who could manage it. In a matter of weeks, roughly 20,000 people, nearly half the city's population, abandoned Philadelphia entirely. Those who remained were largely the poor, those with nowhere to go, and the dead. The government itself dissolved. Secretary of War Henry Knox fled. Secretary of State Thomas Jefferson left for Monticello. Alexander Hamilton, the Secretary of the Treasury, actually contracted yellow fever himself, though he would survive. And President George Washington? He departed in early September, telling himself it was simply the normal end of his summer stay. He never returned to Philadelphia while the epidemic burned. For the first time in the young nation's history, the federal government essentially ceased to function. There was no functioning cabinet. Congress had recessed. The city that was supposed to prove to the world that democracy could work looked, for all the world, like an abandoned ruin. Now here is where it gets truly remarkable and why this story deserves far more attention than it gets. Into the vacuum stepped two extraordinary groups of people. First, the free black community of Philadelphia, led by Absalom Jones and Richard Allen, founders of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. They had been told, falsely, that black people were immune to yellow fever. They were not immune, but they volunteered anyway. They nursed the sick. They carried the dead. They organized relief when the white power structure had completely collapsed and fled. Their courage was staggering, and their reward? After the epidemic ended, many white Philadelphians accused them of price gouging and misconduct, allegations that were largely fabricated and later refuted. History treated them shamefully, until researchers in later centuries began to restore their story. The second group was the volunteers and doctors who stayed behind, including Benjamin Rush himself, who worked until he nearly died, bleeding patients in keeping with the medical theories of the time. Theories we now know were often making patients worse. Rush was wrong about the treatment, but relentless in his dedication. He wrote letters, kept records, and refused to abandon the city, even as his own patients died all around him. If you're finding this story as gripping as we do, this is the perfect moment to subscribe to this channel and hit that like button. We cover the hidden turning points of history that shape the world you live in today, and we're just getting started. So how did the epidemic finally end? Not through medicine, not through heroic intervention. The yellow fever was spread by Aedes aegypti mosquitoes, a fact nobody in 1793 understood. The connection between mosquitoes and yellow fever wouldn't be proven until over 100 years later. What ended the epidemic was the arrival of the first hard frosts of autumn, which killed the mosquitoes. By November, the disease was gone. The final death toll was catastrophic. Somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 people died in Philadelphia during those months, in a city of 50,000. That would be the proportional equivalent of hundreds of thousands of deaths in a modern American city. The suffering was almost unimaginable, and the aftermath changed America in ways we still feel. The epidemic accelerated the push to move the nation's capital to a new site, one that would eventually become Washington, D.C. It exposed the brutal racial inequalities baked into the foundation of the Republic. It revealed how fragile governmental continuity really was. And it forced the young nation to ask hard questions about public health, civic responsibility, and who truly shows up when a city needs saving. The answer, in 1793 Philadelphia, was not the founding fathers. It was the forgotten ones, the black volunteers, the nurses, the gravediggers, the ordinary people who stayed behind while the powerful fled. Every time a society faces a catastrophe, we discover who it was actually built for and who it was built by. In 1793, the most honest answer came not from Independence Hall, but from the streets surrounding it. Philadelphia survived. The Republic survived. But the story of that summer should never have been buried as deeply as it was. And now you know it. If this episode opened your eyes to a piece of history that deserves more attention, please share it with someone who loves American history. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss a story that cuts through the myths and finds the truth underneath. The past is never as simple as we were taught, and honestly, it's always more fascinating.